Okay, Mr. Chairman, it's all yours there, and let me just share my screen so you can read the disclosure. You'll just have to say capital improvement instead of Dudley Board of Selectmen.
Sure.
All yours.
Okay. All right. It's March 30th, 5:34 p.m. This is the meeting of the Capital Improvement Committee. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 18, this meeting of the Board of the Capital Improvement Committee will be conducted in total or in part via remote participation. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at dudleymass.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so in the following manner via YouTube Live and or post a link at www.dudleyma.gov. All right. I'll call the meeting to order and we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag, States of America, to the Republic, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty,
justice for all.
Thank you. All right, first up on the agenda, we have Mary Pigney is the last name? Pigsley?
Yep, Mary Jude.
Mary Jude. Hi, Mary Jude. Again, my name's Mike Mayotte. On the Capital Improvement Committee today, I think we have Paul. Paul, I always bought your last name because you should
just Paul.
Just Paul's good. We have Paul and some other members here. We kind of had asked if you could come down and kind of give us a little, kind of a more of a picture of some of the things we face here with some of this PFAS that we're discovering in our water, and maybe kind of give us kind of a guidelines on some of these regulations, what's our responsibility and stuff like that. So I'll turn it over to you, and so you can kind of give us a synopsis of what we got to deal with this PFAS stuff.
Sure. And because I don't know a lot of the technical stuff and I need backup to make sure I don't misspeak, I have the A team with me from the Central Region. Mary L. Stone is our Deputy Regional Director for all of the water programs, including the drinking water program. And Bob Bostwick is the drinking water program section chief for the region. Has been working with George and with others pretty closely throughout this episode. And we'll continue to do so. We'll provide as much technical assistance to the town as you need. So not quite sure where to start. I did not bring back the slides that we presented back in January at the time that the town had to do the public education about the PFAS in well 03G, I think is the one.
Yep, correct.
The public education notice that had to go to all the customers was triggered because the town sampled the wells for PFAS, and we regulate 6 PFAS compounds for a total of 20 parts per trillion as the drinking water standard. The town sampled and had a reading over 20, and that triggered under the regulations, not a violation of the drinking water standard, and I'll get to that in a minute, but the requirement that Mass DEP regulation requires the public education materials to be sent out at that point to all of the customers. We started regulating PFAS in October. It set the standard for the 6 PFAS chemicals at 20 parts per trillion. The way the standard is calculated for purposes of compliance is a little tricky. And I apologize for the complexity of this rule. And I think if you ask me questions, it's going to even get more complex as you sort of peel off the layers of the onion. But let's start with the way you determine compliance. The potential for cross-contamination when taking PFAS samples is pretty high if you don't know what you're doing, because the chemicals are everywhere. As we talked about back in January, you could use a Sharpie or wear a Gore-Tex jacket and mess the whole thing up. So when you get a detection, you take a second sample, and that sample is an average of those two. That's what happened in January. You had one sample, you had one monthly sample, and that was the number. The compliance number is actually the quarterly average of 3 monthly samples. So for January, February, March, you take a monthly sample, you add it, you divide it by 3, you round it to 2 significant figures, and that's your number. In January, you only had one sample. You couldn't do a quarterly average because you only had one sample, but the regulation says you still have to do public education materials even if it's only 1 month, because of the short-term exposure problem with these chemicals. So when the department sets a risk-based drinking water standard, it is typically a person drinks 2 liters of water a day, every day for 70 years, and what's the lifetime cancer risk? And that's typically how we do it. In this case, for the sensitive subpopulation that was highlighted in the public education materials, pregnant women, nursing mothers, infants, and people with immune compromised systems have a shorter term exposure. It's not 70 years. It's not 1 year. It's a matter of months or even weeks of exposure to PFAS can cause adverse effects. So the number was set at 20 parts per trillion to be protective of that specific subgroup of people: pregnant women, nursing mothers, infants, and children, and immune compromised people, not children. The public education materials are intended to get that information out to those people, even though there's technically not a violation because you don't have 3/4 of samples yet. But by the time you get there, by the time we wait 90 days, could be too long. So that public education material has to go out the first month you have an exceedance of 20. So that's where we were in January. February, the sample came back at 20. And 20 is not above 20, it's 20. So that was not something that would have triggered public education materials. March came back at 22.52, which is over 20. So that's your third month. And at this point, we take those 3 numbers, we add them, we divide by 3. Your result is 21.7, which is 22, which is more than 20. Now you're in violation. So before, it was just educational materials so that people in those sensitive subgroups could make choices about whether they should drink bottled water, what they wanted to do to protect themselves, to mitigate exposure. It was informational so that people could make choices for themselves. We've been talking to George already. Now you have to do something different. You have to do what's called a public notification, and Bob and George are working on that. It is going to look a lot like the public education materials you already have posted on the town's website, except it's going to say the Dudley water system has violated the drinking water regulations. And it's going to explain all the same things about the health effects, that pregnant women, nursing mothers, and infants are advised not to drink the water. And we're going to ask for the town's plan for how the town is going to mitigate the exposure. So in the beginning, when it's informational, there's nothing, you haven't violated the regulation yet. You can advise people on how to mitigate their exposure. It's a violation now, and the town needs to let us know what the plan is for mitigating exposure. So you have 30 days from, I don't remember, Wednesday, Tuesday, whatever day last week, we got the QA/QC data. And that public notice is going to have to go out the same way the public education materials went out. And we're going to want to know your plan. We actually know your plan. Your plan is a good plan. Your plan is to get the blending going as quickly as possible so that as you continue to take these monthly samples, the blend will, with everybody's fingers crossed, will keep the number below 20, but ultimately get to the place where you can provide treatment. And I have to commend the town for getting out in front of this, even though under the regulation you are in the compliance group that would have started in October. But we had $5 million to give away to get design grants, free money. We hardly ever have free money. And you guys applied for and did get one of those grants, which is excellent. I think it was $178,000. So by being ahead of the curve, that money's all gone now. It would have gone away at the end of June anyway, but we spent it all. This is really important work for the Baker-Polito administration, certainly for Mass DEP. We're hoping there will be more money next year, but right now the money's all gone and you got some of it. So congratulations on that. Not sure what else you want to hear. I mean, there are a lot of nuances in the regulation, but I think for us, the task at hand right now is getting that public notice out, explaining to people that you now have a violation, and I think tell the good news story, which is you have a plan. And then it's up to you guys. I can't speak to what that plan is, but that will be happening next as far as we're concerned.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, John.
Mary Jude, thank you for going through that overview for us, and we certainly appreciate it. Could we dig down a little bit and look at the town of Dudley's timeline in terms of when we discovered it, how we reacted to it, and how we should be, and how we're required to move forward? I think that's some of the underlying question that the capital improvement from a spending perspective has for DEP. Am I right, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, this is, basically this is all new to us too. I guess some of my concerns were, the process of this. I don't know if Paul has any questions or anything on it. Again, this is all brand new stuff to us. I think it's brand new to everybody on this stuff. I did have a couple questions on time frame.
Sure.
You mentioned something about, and this was one of the kind of the confusions I had. You mentioned something about this takes place. The regulations were implemented in October of 2020. Now, as far as like time frame, like say you were right. Some of these regulations are very difficult to understand. But it looked like the initial testing for a town of our size would begin this actually April 1st of 2021. So I was a little confused on that we did a lot of testing prior and that we fall under this January, February, March guideline if the initial testing wasn't required until April 1st. So I was wondering if you could kind of explain why that's a little.
Yeah, so we had also money to pay for the first round of testing for free for every single one of the 1,600 public water supplies in the state.
Okay.
And people signed up for that, would have been signing up ahead of the time because people were signing up even back last year, even before the regulation was in effect. We were telling people the regulation's coming, we're going to be able to do the first round of sampling for you. If you had waited, you wouldn't have gotten that money. Just putting it frankly, you right now would have a problem and you'd be turning around and we'd say, yeah, too bad you weren't here a couple months ago. We had money and now we don't. So I think it is a credit to the town for starting early. Once you started and you got a detection over 10, it moved you from the regular first year of sampling, which was going to be quarterly, it moved you into monthly. Any system that gets a level over 10 is advanced into monthly monitoring. And so that's why you were able now, you had to do February and you had to do March and you had to average them. And we were really, really hopeful. I was talking to George the week before last, I think, saying, you're at 21.47. If your number comes in at like 19, you're going to be just, not that that's a good place to be, sort of riding that razor's edge of compliance or not compliance, but it would have given you breathing room to get that blend up and working. Because back in January, we thought it would be February. But circumstances are what they are, and you are in violation. You're going to have to notify the public again. There'll be a lot of explaining to do about, well, what is different this time and all of this math, which is difficult. If we need to come back and do another meeting, I'm happy to do that. But the point at this time is, what do you have to do? You have to keep on monitoring monthly. If you have April, May, June, and it's over 20, which I hope it's not, you would have to do another public notice. At this point, in the first public notice, you have to give us a plan, and it's going to have to be specific about how you're going to get into compliance. And like I said, I think the plan is a good one. I think it's going to work. So the bad part of it is it does cost money. You don't have a choice though. So you can do some sort of fix that involves treatment, or you can fry all of your customers with bottled water. I'm not sure, why anybody would want to do that, but you're serving water that is over a health-based standard for pregnant women, nursing mothers, infants, and immune compromised. It's your job to do what you can to mitigate that exposure. You have a way, tell us that plan. So in the short term, you're going to have the blend, but in the long term, my understanding is you're looking at treatment. And as I said, we were happy to give you almost $200,000 to get to that treatment answer. If you don't want to do it, I've never had a town tell me they didn't want to do something that was for the public health. If you're telling me that there's a chance that that's not something the town would be interested in, then you're going to have to tell me within the next 30 days what your other plan is. So, I thought there was a plan, and we're on board with your plan. So if that's not your plan, you should tell me sooner rather than later.
Couple of questions, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman.
Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you. So we're talking about bottled water. Do they test bottled water facilities for the PFAS as the water goes out? How does that work?
So we have it on our website, and I'll probably say that often on our website because we have lots of information on the website. On the website, we have data from water suppliers who have voluntarily submitted their results to us. And you can look on that and say, yes, Poland Springs has tested it. So if you are drinking the water today and you know that it's over 20 and you want to protect yourself, you can go out and buy bottled water. Once we've identified the violation, it's not up to the homeowner to buy bottled water. It's up to the town to provide water that is fit and pure to drink.
Oh, my thinking
20,
is, just my thinking is that if someone asks, what if I go buy bottled water? Will that PFAS be in that bottled water? So I just wanted somewhere to go with it. That's all.
Yeah, check our website. The list is there and it's updated.
Okay, thank you. And then second question on the, I guess it's a temporary fix. Pardon me, because I'm not privy to everything that's happened with the attempted mitigation on this, where they blended the two wells. That's not a permanent fix. That's a temporary measure.
And I can let George speak to the technical stuff of what the plan is with blending the two wells, and then also the plan for the new well.
Yeah, that blending operation is, the station's just been recently outfitted with the new well, all the components that we've been waiting to put into it. That's been the real problem, has been the time frame of getting it on ready to go. It's come to that now. However, we have to do some pre-permitting and testing, sampling before we actually put it online, but we're going as fast as we can to do that. So we actually have something scheduled for Thursday to start the process going. Once that blending starts, that'll act as a temporary Band-Aid, because we only have 2 stations in town right now that provide water for the town. The third one is in the process of being with new wells too, just like Station 3 was. That's going to take a little more time, and we're working on that now. In the meantime, our game plan is to also go out and purchase a lease to own GAC vessel, treatment vessel to be put at the site of Station 3, which would probably be in the October-ish timeframe if we're lucky, or maybe a little further on. We're just trying to go as fast as possible with that. And when we put that in place, that's going to directly filter out the PFAS elements at the site of Station 3, where we can run that station at full strength without cutting back to coincide with the other station. And eventually everything will lead into a full treatment plant at the site of Station 6, where everything will be piped over from eventually both pumping stations to Station 6 for permanent treatment to be done there. And that's the game plan we have. I wish it would go faster, but we can only go as fast as we can go. So that's kind of, if that answers your question, Paul.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, George, the PFAS that was discovered we're talking about the well that's over by Schofield Ave, right?
Correct.
That was you're drilling a new well over there, right? Is that?
Yeah, that well previously collapsed back in 2014. It was band-aided twice already. Its lifespan, I'm surprised, hasn't even gone down now, but that's the reason why I put a new well over there. That's what actually triggered the PFAS testing. Any new well source online has to be tested for PFAS.
So that was the well that tested for PFAS, or is there other wells that test?
The other well was Station 6, the one that's on the other side of the fence line there, the one in the woods. That's below the standard. That's down in around the 10 range. Station 3 has always been around the 22 range. It rides the cuff there. Station 1 is the one that we're going to be upgrading to. That's below, but we're not taking any chances with that. We're going to be making sure that's either runs at below or is tied in the tree runs.
Where is that station located in town?
Which one?
You said Station 1.
That's at the West Main Street plant.
Okay, so the one at West Main Street tested below.
Was tested. It held. It was below the standard right now. It's not a station that's online yet. We still have to we drilled the wells. Wells still have to go in. The pumps. The station has to be rehabbed to accommodate the new systems. We're working on that throughout this season, this summer, in the fall. And once that's done, then determinations will be made after testing about if we can run it to a point where it'll help us out a little bit until we get a more decisive idea of what treatment we want to put in here. As far as our most likely idea is to run another main to that other facility and have everybody treat at that Station 6 facility. It's much more.
At this point, what we're dealing with is the station that tested above the PFAS levels that we have to fix. That's down on Schofield Ave.
Yep.
And we ran, I believe we did have a plan of action, and we ran the blending pipe over there. Has that
already
yet?
In place? Everything's in place. Yep.
So when did that go online to blend the water?
It has not gone online yet. It has everything. The components of the station had to be manufactured out of house, and that's what cost us weeks of delay because we have antiquated systems in there. So we had to modify components for the new well, for the variable drive, for the circuit breaking system. The piping had to be put in. A lot of our guys assisted in that piping operation to get it done as fast as we could. Once that's all done, which it is now, then you get into some testing for bacteria, PFAS again. You let it flow. There's a lot of components involved. Plus,
when do you anticipate that line to be able to blend with that water source?
I could only give a guess at about maybe 2 weeks right now. It all depends how the progression of events go.
So I guess because Mary Jude had alluded to a plan that we had to mitigate this. Is this the plan you're talking about?
That is one of 3 components or 4 components that are going to be in our plan, in the plan for that station. That is the plan right now to get that down below the state level. And that's a temporary plan. The better plan comes into play a few months after that for the vessel to be put on site so that it can directly be fed and filtered at the station itself. Don't forget, that's our mainline station. When that station goes down, we don't have enough water to supply the town. So this is why Dudley doesn't have redundancy as far as another well to put online in place of the one that has the PFAS.
So George, this is what starts confusing me. We discovered PFAS in one of our water sources. We're blending a source of water that didn't have PFAS in it over to lower that PFAS level as low as we can.
Yep.
But there's no other PFAS been discovered in any other wells or water source yet, correct?
The levels at 6 are way below the standard. The levels
Okay.
at 3 are just above the standard, or riding on the standard.
So, but
order to
that
meet the
one's being
standard-
blended. Am I correct? That's what I'm
In
trying to,
order
I want
to-
to make sure I get this right.
Yeah, when we're ready to blend, in order to meet the standard continuously, the two stations need to work together consecutively to blend water together and then to ship it out in the distribution system while being tested on a monthly basis.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, this is Jeff Faulkner from Ty and Bond. Can I
Go ahead,
add,
Jeff.
can I add a description of the blending water main?
Sure.
That might clarify?
Thank you.
Sure. So the goal with the blending water main is to blend the pump station 3 site with the pump station 6 site.
Yeah.
Pump station 6 does have PFAS. It is just below the regulatory
Right.
limit. So the blend is it's a mathematical calculation in theory of the concentration and the volume of the water. So the numbers that we're seeing now for station 3 and station 6 might mean that the town needs to throttle back the volume of the station 3, which jeopardizes the ability to provide enough volume for the town. So the blending water main is an interim solution in that it helps to get the town in the right direction, but it is not necessarily the ultimate solution because of the volume issue.
Okay. I'm still confused. I'm sorry. I don't understand how we blend the water source from a source that doesn't have PFAS. You blend it to
It does have PFAS.
Yeah, so I think the point is, it's not a science. It's the engineers describe things and it sounds all good, and it's
Yeah.
sometimes not that clear. The other well does have PFAS. Bob probably has a spreadsheet of all of the results and can tell us what the other well had, but you're not blending 22 with 0. You're blending 22 with 13 or something like
Right.
that. And your larger producing well is the more contaminated one.
Right.
So you're going to have to mix them. You're making a soup, but you don't know how much is the tomato and how much is the chicken stock. And you're going to have to ratchet back on the tomato soup. So you're going to be left with just chicken, or you're not going to have enough soup. So,
Correct.
you can't, you're going to have
But
to
what-
play with it. It
Where-
takes
I mean,
tinkering.
once-
Your water, let me just say, your water system changes seasonally. It's been a dry
Right.
year so far. You don't know how much demand problem you're going to get once you start ratcheting back the well with the higher contamination. We've also seen in some towns, when you do that, the well that has the lower number starts creeping up. So the monthly sampling is going to be important, because you may think you have a solution, and George and Jeff have said, in interim, you may think you have a solution, and you may find out that that doesn't work.
So I
The
guess, Mary-
ratios could be off.
Mary, so what I'm trying to find out here is, we discover this PFAS in a well, in our water source. We got brand new regulations that come into play. We authorize $1 million, it's a lot of money, to
Yeah.
mitigate and lower this PFAS level because we're blending the water. And what is the time frame from here when this goes online for our testing intervals to say, hey, did this blending work or not? I mean, that's
Every
kind of what I'm looking at, is, hey, we spent a lot of money to fix this already. So if this works, what is our time frame in terms of what do we have to report to the EPA, what our plans are? What if this works? What if you say, hey, we can test this monthly for the next year, and we fall below that 20 parts per trillion in this well? I mean, that to me would be a solution, a fix for this. Where do we go from here if we haven't even mitigated what we had already? That isn't come online yet. So, because we're talking
Yeah,
about
so I think,
things like filtration systems, and I'm hearing very,
Yeah,
very
so-
large numbers.
you have to sample every month
Yep.
until you can show that you're reliably and consistently below the standard, which you would have to be at 10 or below. You'd have to be at half to show that you're reliably and consistently below, and you could go to a less frequent monitoring regime. But in terms of whether this interim solution is the final answer to it and you don't have
Well,
to
and
do
yes,
anything
I
else,
mean, it could be a solution. It may not be the solution. We're hoping.
I'm telling you,
hoping
it may
is.
not be the solution, Mike.
It may not be. I mean, we may have to do something drastic, but my concern is I think we're going to be asked to fund something or approve a project, a capital purchase that it can be in a very large capital purchase. So I want to make sure that we actually need to do that. So I guess what in terms of regulations, we've got PFAS. We've mitigated or attempting to mitigate that PFAS. We're blending the water. We haven't done it yet. What is up once we put this online? What time frame? How much testing? How long do we go? Let's say we find PFAS in this 2 months, over 20, 2 months out of the next 8. How long can we go, and what is it going to be before we say, we got to put in a filtration system here? What is our regulation requirement?
So let me answer a different question that you're not asking, but is the answer as far as I'm concerned. Now that you have a violation, we need a plan. If you give us a plan that says we're going to rely on blending until the end of time, or until we get to a point where people who shouldn't be drinking the water are drinking the water again, that's not going to be a good enough plan. I think we're going to want to see something that is not as subject to question as a blending regime that hasn't even started yet. So right now, in the next 30 days, you owe us a plan. And I would encourage you very much not to just give me a plan that's temporary.
Again, Mary, the plan that we implemented, that is not the plan you're accepting? And under
You haven't implemented anything, Mike.
Well,
you're serving water that's not protective of the public health. You haven't done
2
anything.
weeks it comes online. The
You said
blending,
in January that it would be implemented in February, and it wasn't. If we were 2 weeks from now, it would be a different conversation, maybe. But as I was saying, and I think what Jeff was saying, is this blending is not, it's not black and white. Your water is going to change. And I mean, I guess it's up to you and ultimately the voters, if you choose to go with what is an interim solution and you're serving water that's above a health-based standard, you know, who explains that the $1 million was not worth people's health? I'm really just, I'm just struggling with the mindset of, because I haven't, you know, I understand when people feel like they have to spend too much money, but I've never had somebody actually in front of me do the math calculus that there's a number under which it's not worth protecting people's health. So, I mean, I can tell you what the regulations say.
well,
Water that's over 20 is a violation. You can take your chances.
Well, like I say, I mean, anybody in any town in Massachusetts could take a test of water. It can be 21 parts per trillion. And the next answer is an $11 to $15 million water filtration facility. I mean, there has to be something we can follow that isn't more of a scare tactic. George came to the Capital Improvement Committee last year with these tests and said, this is what we need to mitigate this now. The Capital Improvement Committee took that very seriously, and we authorized a blending, close to $1 million, I think it was $1 million in blending to mitigate. That was the answer to, and we haven't even put that online yet. So I don't even know what to say here. I mean, we haven't even put that online to see if it even works. If it doesn't work, I think we get step 2, but don't we got to go forward with what we started with?
And again, that's a plan. And I think what I'm hearing from George and Jeff is that if you can't run Station 3 at its higher level, you're not going to have enough water for people to drink. So it's not as simple as you're describing it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a temporary solution to use less of that water to blend. you're going to have capacity issues. It's going to be summertime. You're going to have water conservation measures that are going to have to be very tight until you get, my understanding is the real fix. This is not the real fix. This is a Band-Aid to get you to the real fix, unless you decide that it's not worth treating the water for the people of Dudley. That's your decision.
John, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I mean, just gonna chime in a little bit here. Mary Jude, can I ask a question? Are we doing the right things so far? Are we on the right track based on, I know now that we're in violation and what George and everybody has? I want everybody to feel like that we got this under control and we know the next steps to take. I want your opinion.
Well, I thought so. I mean, I've spoken, I know Bob has spoken way more than I have, but I've spoken with George because last week we were waiting for that March number to come in, and unfortunately it came in higher.
I know that's the first time I heard that. I
and-
was like, oh.
Yeah, but and not that everything would have been fine if you were at 20 or 19, you still would have a problem. But now we're in this place where I need a plan. And the plan that I heard was a good plan. And now I'm hearing that there might not be the political will to pay for the plan.
No, I think Mike's just asking questions, right, Mike?
Yeah,
Okay,
no,
okay.
listen, I'm not here to stop, clean water, okay? I'm not against
Yeah.
clean water. Let's get that straight. I'm trying to make sure, as my responsibility on a committee, that when I make a recommendation to my town, my fellow townsmen, I have information to make that competent decision. So far to date, those decisions were made because we were told that there was PFAS and we were told there was a solution to that or a mitigation problem. And that still hasn't come online yet. But yet, even though that hasn't come online yet, I'm still being told that I need another solution. And yet, I don't even know what that solution is. I haven't even been presented on our committee what that solution is. So that's why I'm trying to ask the questions here.
Mike,
Find out what our obligations are as a town. Where do we fall into these regulations? Where do we go from here without accepting what we've already done?
Go ahead, Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Sullivan had his, wanted to be recognized.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I also wanted to point out that the $1 million for the blending project also would have to be done to do the next step of the treatment, regardless of whether the blending worked. When we go to a treatment plant, we would have had to add that $1 million project into it. So it's not like it was a waste of money. It was a portion of the project that would have to be done in order to get to where we need to in the end anyway. And if you take a chance at the sampling, I mean, if you look at the results across the state, Station 3 or Station 6 could be below the limit, but we've had numbers that were, above 10, and you're running the risk of the blending is kind of a interim to try to keep us out of violations. And once you're in a violation, the DEP can issue fines. They can issue the requirement to provide bottled water to all, and that's just money out the door, not going towards treatment. You're just going to spend that money and it's not going to come back. But
So I guess, and I'll put this to George or Scott. What's the next step? What are you talking about for capital improvement?
Mike,
Go ahead.
okay, first of all, I gave you guys a complete plan of where we're going and how it's proceeding through the next couple of years, or at least the next 10, aside from other infrastructure that the water department has that we have to have. But as far as the PFAS situation goes, we're going as fast as we possibly can go in the right direction. And I don't want anybody to misunderstand all this stuff about, well, if we do this, maybe we can get away with that. No, the water department doesn't go that route. We go the right route, the right way, the state's way. And we're doing it right now. And what we're doing is the blending will start when it's all set to go. It will blend the water. We'll see where it takes us. In the meantime, our next step is already in progress for a temporary vessel to be put on the site of Station 3. Once that's in place, that will take care of it, and that'll buy us time for the main treatment center. Wait a minute, hold on. That treatment vessel will also be used for the treatment facility at 6 when it's ready to go. It's a lease to own. So we're being proactive with that. We're being proactive with all the SRF funding for all these projects, the grant and all the money we need to do these projects. We're ahead of the game. And I cannot rely on numbers to jump from 5 to 10 to 8 to 9 or whatever, anticipating, well, we might go low this month, but next month we might be high. It's all going to get higher as we go. It's the way of the world with wells. They continuously draw in water. And when you continuously draw in water, you can continuously draw in PFAS. We don't know where it's coming from. I don't really care at this time where it's coming from. My job is to deal with it right now. My board and I have been doing it the right way. The DEP's happy. Unfortunately, it takes time to do these projects. We don't just draw a hat and pull out money and say, okay, we'll get it done in a week. It takes months. It takes even 1 month to get a sample back, one sample back. That's why the 3 months they give you for the sampling periods. But we have to make decisions, and the board has been great in making these decisions upon my recommendations and the DEP and the engineer's recommendations on where we need to go with this. So everything right now is working to get to a certain level, a final treatment center in the next 2.5 years. Once that treatment center is in place, you have a good working treatment center at the lowest possible cost that you could get it for. And we're lucky we're in this stage now, not in October or next year, where it's going to cost us more time, more money, no funding.
So George,
You know,
the temporary filtration system, temporary.
Yep.
How much does that cost?
That we haven't got that yet, but that'll be about $750,000. Along with, that'll be part of the new treatment center too. It's not wasted money. It's part of the existing one to be put in at Station 6.
What is then after this temporary? You're looking for a full water treatment facility.
Absolutely.
And how much is something like that?
Well, don't mistake it with a sewer treatment plant type of thing. This is two big vessels.
I'm asking a simple question. It looks like we have time frame deadlines here.
Hold on.
You're asking capital improvement to approve capital purchases of a large amount of money. We have very little time, apparently. We have very little time to approve these things. So where are we go from here on capital improvement? What are we going to do? I mean, you $750,000. I haven't seen anything on $750,000 yet.
That should have been on your that should have been in your packet that you got.
I haven't seen a thing.
All right. Well, we have a packet that lists all that out along with the amounts out. I thought you got that. You should have had that last week.
Scott, you got a question?
Yes, the last meeting, I presented that list to you. I've got it right here next to me. And your chairman at the time read me the riot act because you guys didn't have it, only to find out that the treasurer collector had it in his spreadsheet already. It's out there. I don't know where it is. I don't know why you don't have it in your hands. We have proposed a 10-year plan, which includes all of this. The $750,000 is $350 from a previous borrowing, and another $400 we're asking for this year. As far as this meeting here is concerned, we need to do what our plan was for this year. This is what we're concerned about. All of the long-term planning, that's ongoing. That's ongoing with our committee. If you have concerns about that, attend our meetings, please.
Well,
we'd love to have people attend
Mr. Chairman,
and ask questions.
Go ahead, Paul.
just a couple of, I guess, just a point of reference here is that no one is challenging the need for this type of system. I think what some people were stuck on is that blending pipe that was installed. I don't think it was clarified as just a temporary measure.
No, it wasn't.
There may have been some perception that could be the fix.
Blending could be a fix. It could be. We're not putting a whole lot of we're not willing to gamble on that.
Okay.
So in the meantime, we're working on the next steps. That pipe that is being used now for blending is going to be used in the treatment process, the permanent treatment process that is what, 2 to 3 years down the road.
Okay, so I understand
after engineering and building and everything else, it'll be 2 years or so before we get that online.
Okay,
in the meantime, we have to do steps in order to make things work. That's what we were elected to do.
Okay,
Can I
no,
ask-
I understand that
can I ask you-
the process
sorry, go ahead.
is lengthy and there's a lot of study put into this. Now, 2 or 3 years from now, we have this water filtration system in place. What is the annual operating costs?
Who knows?
Has anybody projected that yet?
At this point, no, we don't know what the operational cost will be. We can guess based on what the media costs what's the electric costs. Who knows? Electric bills, we don't know what they're going to be 3 years from now. We have no control over that. The media costs, we can talk about that in today's dollars, but that could change. In the meantime, as PFAS becomes more widespread, because most communities aren't testing for it yet. As it becomes more widespread, technology may change. We don't know. We don't know. We can't predict the future. All we can do is act on what we know from the past and what we need to do to move forward.
Well, I understand that. It just, I honestly believe it wasn't someone challenging the information. It was just more clarification on what was already in place. That's all it is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, this is Jeff Faulkner from Ty and Bond. Can I add to some of that discussion?
Sure.
So at the town meeting last June, there was 2 PFAS articles that the
Yeah.
town approved. One was for the $1 million for the blending water main,
Mhm.
and one was for $200,000, which has turned into a $178,000 grant from DEP.
Mhm. Yeah, I know.
PFAS phase 1 was the blending. PFAS phase 2 was the grant. In the grant is paying for the pilot study and preliminary design of a permanent treatment plant. That study is ongoing, and that will be submitted to the town and to DEP as a pilot study report, which will have some costs for operational
So-
for consideration as well.
May I ask one question to George?
Yep.
What is our flow? What is the average flow of our water here? What are we
In order
talking?
in order to maintain capacity to the tanks on a average basis, runs around 525 to 550 gallons per minute, coming between 2 stations. Now, the stations don't run consecutively like in the plan for blending. They run separately. One may be in the lead, one may be second after that. Once it's all determined by the tanks and what the amount of water in the tanks. So you could actually say right now we're actually blending water because station 6 runs a lot in the lead, and that's the one that has the low PFAS. So the other one falls in suit. You know the stations are close by,
Yep.
so you know water's intermixing. But however, we can't use that as our way of getting by. So in order for these stations to run together and put out enough water, we have to make sure that they're pumping close to that in order to maintain our supply of water. So that's another big consideration we're going to have here. So this summer is going to be pretty for us right now.
So in terms of projects, when Scott was going over the 10-year capital project, 2022 included about $11 million. Am I correct, Scott?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right. So I'm hearing 750 for a temporary filtration system. What is the 11 million that you were looking for?
$11 million
this year?
was
We're talking this year.
$11 million. This is we've been approved for a no interest loan from the state for $11.5 million.
Now, how did you get
We have
approved
to
for a loan?
accept that, and then we can start working on how we're going to spend it.
So you have to understand is with a capital improvement, if you're requesting a capital project of $750,000 or $11 million or $100 million, you've got to show capital improvement that you need that, and you got to show that you went and priced it out. I have nothing. None of us on capital improvement have absolutely anything to justify saying spend $750,000 or spent $11 million. So if we're in this time frame problem, well, we got to get this fixed, and it appears that we do. If the next step is the $750,000 temporary filtration system, have you guys priced this out? somewhere? And do
Yes,
you
we've
have
been,
these things?
it's an ongoing process. The five members of the Board of Water and Sewer Commissioners
Yeah,
were elected to do this. That's our job.
sure.
That's what we've been elected to do,
So-
and that's what we're doing on a monthly basis. We've
So
brought in
when-
folks from the DEP to answer your questions.
We need, obviously.
I don't know
to
how
get
much
this
you
done.
need. We've got plans, we've got some plans, what's going on, what's ongoing, we
When-
have.
when-
In the
and I'll ask-
meantime,
and I'll ask
we're
George this
having
too.
new plans
When are
drawn
you
up for the
guys gonna
stuff going
have
forward.
when are you guys gonna have proposals from at least three? You know, it requires three different proposals. Who do you have for vendors that are gonna come and bring this water filtration system and set this up? Who do we have, George? for
We're
this?
working with vendors. The bidding hasn't gone out yet for the vendors. We just did the final approval to put this temporary treatment in 2 months ago or a month ago.
Okay,
Time, it takes about 6 months leeway time just to even get the process of getting one in here. So there's plenty of time to get the bidding out there and ready to go. My capital improvement plan had all the specs written out of all the pricing through the engineering firm, which were researched through the engineering firm, because a lot of this stuff is stuff that common Joes don't know a lot about. So
right.
we have to get it right through the professionals of where this stuff has to come from, the pricing of it, and some of it's still generalized cost factors that we can get to a point, but sometimes there's things that come into play, such as at the station, where we ended up adding more money to retrofit components that we were unaware
So-
needed to be fitted. You know what I'm saying?
What you're saying is that Paul, myself, and the other members of the capital improvement, you have some bids out for this 700, so for the next phase right now, for the $750 filter, you have bids that we can look at.
It's engineering
see
estimate.
this-
It's in engineering right now.
Okay,
It's
So
We
we
have
not-
to pay for that.
It has not, the bids will come out. You can view the bids at your leisure when they do come out.
Okay.
We're not at that stage yet. We're going, like you said, we're going from one thing to another thing to another thing to another thing. But it's also been a fast-paced reaction in a year's time to do all these things. And I'm surprised we've gotten this far to at least get to the point we are now to meet the standard and get the blending done. But you got to understand, the system has been antiquated since 2000 when we dropped our third station, and it never was brought back up to speed with new wells. I had to do that in the last year. Station 3, same thing. Had to bring this up in the last year. All the station retrofits and rehabilitations have to do that in the next
Well,
year. It's a
like I
it's a
said, I know you guys got a big job, but what I'm saying, and I'll try to simplify this. When the police department, let's get out of the water and sewer. The police department says we want to buy a brand new pickup truck, cruiser. The police department brings to capital improvement 3 bids. They go to 3 different places. They find the bids on the same truck that they want, 3 different bids. We take a look at those bids. We ask questions as to what they need on those trucks. They tell us what they need on those trucks. They tell us where the funding's coming from, whether it's going to be free cash, whether it's going to be a debt exclusion, or they've got money in accounts, or there's grants coming. So they have to present that to capital improvement. We look at that, we vote on it, we make a decision. The same process has to play out for water and sewer. You've got a capital project. I know it's tough to put this stuff together, but I want to make sure that we're scheduling our capital improvement meetings to meet these demands. I don't want to meet in the fall as the next meeting and we're already past our deadlines. We want to meet so that we can approve these projects, not just, we need $750,000 to do something and we don't have anything in writing. We need to know what this stuff is. That's why we're trying to have these meetings now so that we can get this information.
You got, yeah, we brought you that.
Mr. Chairman, can I, is it all right if I, through you, ask Mary Jude a couple of questions? And
Sure.
I think if we're at the point where are we done with the experts now, you think? I don't want to
Sure. No, I'm,
ask them to sit through our debate. Is that all right? Is that work for you?
yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. Mary Jude, and feel free to call on anyone else that may answer the question or be able to answer the question. I hope shoulder the burden for the rest of the 3 minutes that you'll be with us. There's one thing that was said earlier that I want to be very clear about. We're now at the point where DEP is asking for a written plan based on the testing. Previous to that, why was there no requirement for a written plan?
The town was technically not in violation of the standard because there hadn't been 3 months of testing. I think there was planning, clearly there was planning going on in the town, but there was not a requirement at that point because there wasn't a violation.
Okay, and that's how I understood it as well. So I just want to be clear because I think it might have gotten lost somewhere over the course of the discussion that the town and the town had a plan, a verbalized plan. We talked about it last time. We've been talking about it for months. We weren't at the point where we technically were required to provide a written plan, but we've been talking about blending for a while now. So we didn't not have a plan in the past. And I'm saying this for the benefit of those who are listening, because I think everybody on this call kind of understands that. Now it's the requirement for the town, for the water and sewer commissioners to provide DEP with a written plan based on 3 months average of testing. So I just want to be very clear that we weren't just hanging around waiting for a bad test result. We had a plan almost from the beginning. And I know that because I sat with George on many painful mornings when he went over PFAS and my head was spinning, but we got to the point where he had a plan for it. He always had a plan for it. He had a plan for it so much that I knew about it. I think the treasurer collector who has nothing to do and should never have anything to do, like anybody else should have anything to do with blending for PFAS, knew this verbatim. I knew it verbatim. We've talked about it ad nauseum. There is a plan going forward, but now we've met that threshold after 3 months average to provide DEP with a written plan. So I don't want those who might be viewing this meeting to think that, or go away with the idea that Dudley had no plan and we just said, let's see what happens. And now we need a ton of money, because that's what I'm starting to think based on this conversation. And that's not the case whatsoever. More of a statement than a question, I guess. But I appreciate it.
Anybody else have any questions for Mary or John?
Yeah, one more, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mary. Like, so as part of the plan that the elected water sewer board is going to come up with, like, do we also have to come up with, you know, again, the water bottle idea, where is that part of our mitigation strategy now that we're in compliance, or is that our plan is our plan and we won't have to set something like that up?
So what I'm hearing and what I thought.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that
Yeah,
it's our
so,
duty.
right, what I'm hearing is there's a plan. If there was not a plan, and like I said, Bob has been talking a lot with George, and we knew there was planning, and it was just sort of holding our collective breath for this March result to come in.
Yeah.
If you didn't have a plan, you had no blending available, you couldn't take the bad well offline, you have no interconnection with another town, you would have to have a plan, and that plan would really be limited to providing an alternate water source.
Okay.
Or one of the things that we have accepted in another community was have people buy their own bottled water and you give them a rebate on their water bill. So it takes away the incredible logistical nightmare that is providing bottled water. I can tell you exactly how bad that is, and it's a bad thing to do. There's another community, not in this region, that is 4 years away from a treatment plant, has no blending, has no other options except to continue providing water over the limit to its citizens. They're thinking of installing vending machines throughout town. So, you know, you have these other solutions that are very, like the last thing you would want to do.
Okay, no, that's
It's
great.
good
That's
that you have a plan.
That's why
So
I
right
wanted to
now,
make sure we touched on that.
as long as you have the plan, that is the way I'm hearing you describe it, just from the technical angle. You know, you have the blending, which we all hope to be in place by now. You have the lease to own equipment that's coming on in October that is going to be a component of the final treatment system. So as you know, as you said, I have heard this plan and it's a good plan. It's the plan that I expect to see when you get us our submittal. And that's where my involvement sort of ends. You know, you need to give us a plan to provide fit and pure water. If that's the plan, it's a good plan.
Thank you, Mary Jude. I appreciate that. And
Sure.
thanks for coming, all of you from DEP.
Sure.
Anybody else have any questions? Or I don't want to keep you guys if you don't, you know.
No, I'm obviously hungry with my bad soup analogy.
Well, we'll let you go if you want to go. We really appreciate you coming in and answering some of those questions for us, because this is very confusing.
Yeah, I'm certainly happy, you know, as you talk it through and you have other questions, just reach out. I mean, we're dealing with a number of communities. Unfortunately, like I said, Dudley is pretty well positioned. You have an option, you got some free money, you're ahead of the big batch of people who are coming, starting sampling in April. We've been able to give you a lot of technical assistance. Our pleasure. I mean, I'm not saying it was any more than you deserve. It's just our resources are going to be spread pretty thin very soon. And I can only make Bob work, you know, 12-hour days, 7 days a week for so long, and then he'll lose his hair. Oh, wait. So, you know, you're really
He's got a
well
good-
positioned
He's got a good year.
in terms,
There's
as
a
bad
lot of
as
that
it
in this
is,
meeting.
it's you know, it's a tough thing to tackle, and nobody saw it coming. I get that, but the town, like it or not, I mean, you are in a very good position compared to other communities in terms of the alternatives that you have. But ask your questions. George can call Bob, you know, anybody can reach out and we'll get you answers to your questions. If something is coming up right before town meeting, John has my cell phone number, you know, call, we'll get you whatever you need when you need it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. You're welcome. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Mary.
Bye-bye.
Okay, does anybody have anything else? I guess we have next on the agenda.
Okay,
would be
before
Water
we go,
Department. So,
can I ask one more question?
go ahead.
And I'm not sure who this is to, but back to the analogy of the police cruiser. If I got this right, next week we're opening up bids to do Mason Road. Does that mean we have to wait until those bids are open before we can get an approval from capital improvement?
Well, Scott, you've already got improvement on that, don't you?
Yeah, we're asking for approval of a concept that we have to work over a number of months, a number of years. We can't just
I wish Mark was here to kind of explain what we're under obligation for in terms of a committee. When you understand that you can't just say we need 750,000, we need $1 million to do something without presenting some sort of a bid on that. You just can't do that. We have to have something
Well,
in front
then
of
we're
us.
hamstrung. We're hamstrung
Mr.
then.
Chair, I
You've already been-
I can
that's
add a
already-
We
little
don't
bit to
get
that.
to a bid process till way down the line.
Well, listen, how do you know it costs $750,000 for a temporary water filtration system? How do you
Because
know?
on my screen, the guy whose face is right between yours and mine told us it was gonna cost about
Okay,
that
but
much money.
you understand how that works, Scott? If he got it for 750,000, where did he get that number from? That comes from a bid.
He's an engineer. That's what he does for a living.
I
and we have to
don't know if
trust
I'm making
that.
sense there.
We have
Rich,
to
you got
trust that.
anything you can?
The bottom line is you can either approve it or not approve it. If you don't approve it, we're gonna go to the town meeting floor and ask the townspeople to approve it.
I don't know if you can do that.
Yes, we
We're not,
can.
see, we're not in a position of telling any head of department or anything to that nature. We're not in a position to tell them that we don't want to do their project. We're, as a committee, we're obligated to do our financial responsibility in making sure, okay, that the capital that's being purchased, or the capital equipment's being purchased, is legitimate. It's been bid out properly. I mean, this is how government works, Scott. Okay, if you just say You can't just walk in and say, I need $750,000, approve it, rubber stamp it, and that's the end of it. We need more information to make a competent decision.
Then
I
we
don't know if
can't-
that, does that
Mr.
not make
Chairman?
sense?
The Mason Road project started 3 years ago. How
Mr.
are we,
Chairman,
so we would have to wait
Does anybody
until
have something
next
they
week to
wanna
get
add?
approval? That's ridiculous.
So, no,
Mr.
That
Chairman,
is
let's-
micromanagement
I
on
don't
the
think that's
highest
what we're
level.
talking about here.
Mr. Chairman,
let me clarify this for a second, because I think I can help out both sides of the argument. Any bid that's received in town, whether it's a police car or set, or meets a certain threshold, and by far, this project meets that threshold, has to fall within certain procurement laws, and that's got my name attached to it as the chief procurement officer, so that bids that are received fall under that standard. So no matter what, it's not like we're not going to be in a situation where it's, my name is on the line in terms of the bids that we accept. It's not the water and sewer commissioners, capital improvement, and the board of selectmen. It's directly, I'm the one who opens the bid. So there's not going to be a situation, I promise you, with capital improvement is not going to be able to review those bids that I receive. And I have to follow a certain criteria to accept those bids. They have to meet the need for the town. There are certain criteria that have to be it can't just be the highest one or somebody's cousin or anything like that. You know that. So I will absolutely make sure without question that the capital improvement committee sees the bids, and when you see them, you'll understand why those certain people were selected. There won't be there's not going to be anything that's not above board in terms of procurement or opening bids. It's a public bid opening.
Thank you.
Yep.
Rich?
Mr. Chairman, if I could add, the way I see, and we'll just use the $1 million for the transitional line. The way I understand it, we have Ty and Bond as an engineer
Mhm.
who's gone through and said, we've got some standards. It's going to take a presumed amount of hours with this piece of equipment, this man hour, going through land at this grade to come up with an approximation and then translate it into an approximate dollar amount. You don't know if there's a boulder that's hidden underneath there or you're going to run into anything. You also don't know if it's going to be easier than estimated, but I would imagine all of the bids have been put together with a few standards in place. Putting in a transitional pipe has probably been done 100 times this year in Massachusetts. So there's a pretty good idea of how to get to the number. Now to go back, and you can't put the cart before the horse, but you have a pretty good plan. Same thing if you're going to build a house. This is approximately what it's going to cost. Nobody sat there and sort of rolled some dice. It's been done enough times so that's sort of a plan and an outline. Back to what the town administrator was talking about, who responds to the bid and how the bids come out. That's the reason it's a bid. They're all responsible bids. And we have the ability to disqualify an unresponsive bidder. Like the analogy of somebody's brother-in-law or somebody's cousin, the town has to sign their name to it, so it's going to be reliable, and fingers crossed it's going to be the best price. I think the ultimate goal was to figure out, or at least get us pointed in the right direction of how does everything get paid for. If everybody does their part, we arrive at a point where the $1 million for the transitional pipe needs to be paid for. We all know it's going to be, I think it's a 10-year note over 10 years. It's going to be X amount of money, and they've gone through and done the rate study to figure that in. I think with this $11.5 million project that's coming up, that's one of the discussions that's going to be had. It's a major discussion, and I won't add to it right now, but I think we're looking for quite a few things. And I'll add my own little point that I have sat on this board since day one, and I've watched $50,000 and $100,000 projects be heavily scrutinized. I think for an $11.5 million project, I don't think it's unreasonable to go through and ask for some hard data. I also think that some hard questions are going to need to be asked, because at one point, a great deal of people are going to pay back $11.5 million. I also go to bed and sleep well at night knowing that I believe the answers are here and they're at our fingertips, or could be shortly. I don't think any of this is too far of a stretch. I think we'd be able to assemble the right amount of information that satisfies everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. So I'm gonna ask, Rich and Paul on this, and George, I'd like you, and Jeff to add, weigh in on this. So in doing some of my research and trying to figure some of this stuff out, I got in contact with one of the top companies that works in this PFAS, municipal PFAS stuff. He's a regional manager of Massachusetts. He's I don't know if you've heard of these guys, the Calgon Carbon Corporation. Has anybody heard of those?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I reached out to him. I had a great conversation with him regarding this. Gave me a lot of information about what he's doing in a lot of these towns, especially with these new regulations. And he's basically saying, and I'm kind of saying, hey, well, what, without knowing exactly what the flow rate is and what we need to do, what are we talking about as far as PFAS, filtering out PFAS? What are the guarantees on some of the things that you use to filter out PFAS? He gave me a pretty good rundown. I'd love to have him join us for maybe a 15-minute or so on capital improvement to kind of give us a little better idea of what some of the equipment that they use to filter this stuff out. When we were talking some numbers, he says we could put a slab down. We can build a little house, and we could put in one of our top design filtration that will remove PFAS down to practically zero. And he was talking in the range of $500,000 to $1 million for stuff like this. So I'd love to have him come in and kind of talk and see what you guys think about this. It's a far cry from, when I mentioned, we were possibly looking at anywhere from $5 to $11 million. He basically said, you're looking at putting a treatment facility in. He says, that's not what we're doing all over New England. We're not putting water treatment centers in. We're putting in filtration systems, much different thing. So I just thought I'd just pass that along and see if there's we can have this maybe somebody come in on a committee. Go ahead, Scott. You got a quick question?
We have to be careful because Calgon is one of the vendors, I believe. And I'll let Jeff confirm this, but Calgon is one of the vendors that we're looking at.
Absolutely,
We
yes.
start playing around with this and other people start dillying in that. Are we going to start screwing with procurement laws?
Well, yeah.
That's what we were elected to do. Let us do our job. We are coming to you to ask you to help us with the financial side of it.
I'm putting this out to you. Would you be willing to have somebody that's in the business, that's doing this treatment stuff on the municipal side, come down and give us what some of their ideas are?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, let me refer to Jeff to give you a more accurate idea, because a lot of the research he did too on this temporary vessel. He can explain a lot of factors with this and give you maybe a better understanding.
Well, you know what? I'm going to have to actually turn this. Paul, is there any way you can take this meeting over and continue it? I'm going to have to adjourn the meeting here, or adjourn myself here.
Yeah.
I have a client here. I'll watch the rest on YouTube. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so George, you just want to refer and see what we can do to clarify this information. And again, I don't want to have people get emotional about this, but questions add clarity, and it gives good background for good decision making. This is a tremendous amount of money, and there was a statement made that there's no guarantees that this is actually going to do what we needed to do. So if you spend that kind of money, you would really hope that it would take care of what the problem is.
I can speak to that real quick, and then give it over to Jeff for the other stuff. With that statement about not sure knowing, that's just the blending part. That's just the temporary blending treat that we're doing right now. Just keep in mind that main that was done is also going to be used for treatment at a further time period in a couple of years for the main treatment facility. We're hoping that the vessel that we're talking about will come into play, that Jeff's going to talk about in a few minutes. Well, that'll be the one that'll do the optimum job of getting rid of the PFAS, be placed at the station, and that'll buy us all the time we need to get the treatment facility going, and the Station 1 project. But I'll let Jeff just give you a briefing on the temporary vessel that Mark is talking about.
Thanks, George. So just a clarification, we are speaking with 3 vendors that will be getting 3 quotes to hand over to the town. One of them is Calgon, one of them is Evoqua, and one of them is ETC2. Just for your information on that. Couple points I wanted to make with the recent discussions. The numbers we're throwing out there are budgets. They're engineers' estimates. They're equal to the level of the status of the design point of the project, which we're in a permanent treatment plant, we're in a 5 or 10% design point. But this is standard. This is absolutely standard for infrastructure projects. It's not like buying a vehicle that has already been engineered and it's basically off the shelf. It would be like asking a department head to provide 3 quotes of a vehicle that hasn't been designed yet. That is the equivalent of asking for 3 quotes, hard quotes now, for a full treatment system that isn't designed yet. The dates that are provided for these appropriations are in order to meet the deadlines that the state regulatory funding agencies require in order to proceed with getting the 0% interest loans and principal forgiveness to the project. So it is mandated that if you want the $11.5 million funding through the SRF program, that you have construction appropriations in place by June 30th of this year, or else you withdraw your application and submit it next year with the multitude of other towns that will also be facing PFAS treatment plants.
Okay, so just let me verify what you're saying is that
yes,
you really look at what the overall costs of construction would be. You package that into a plan. Hopefully, you can just put that in by the 30th, so you can apply for your 0% loan. Simple as that.
You could say that. It's a little more complicated than that, but yeah, you can simplify it to that.
But the crux of it is just that.
It's a stepwise process, and the numbers right now are budgeting so that you can appropriate money at town meeting with the hopes that the project will be less.
Okay, so I guess maybe what some of the issues are is, okay, are we doing the right thing? Why do we need the entirety of monies needed up front? But clearly, you do not. I mean, maybe it's a good thing that we're up front on this. Maybe it's a good thing that we just, we're discovering this before everyone else, because opportunities for financial help and low interest loans and grants, they'll be offered to people up front. So that's a positive thing on our end. So, okay. So we're looking at a complete budget so we can put it together, apply for our loans before June 30th, and we go from there.
Yep. If I could add one more thing before, and I see Rich has his hand up, but one more thing to add before that. With regard to speaking to a vendor about a particular budget that one member may have gotten on the side. So the number of $500 to $1 million for a filter vessel is in the line of the $750,000 temporary vessel that we would house outside. Once the bigger dollar values of the 11.5 include buildings, chemical feed systems, miles of piping to get it from one source to another. There's thousands of other variables other than speaking to one vendor about one filter costs.
Okay, thank you. You good?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Rich?
Mr. Chairman, through you, Jeff, so we have a place marker for 11.5 million. What we're looking to do is to get the approval. Ultimately, it goes through capital improvement, FAA, selectmen stand behind it. It gets voted through the authorization. Anybody who's borrowed money with me in the last 5 years knows it's all compliance. We need to make sure that everything is a green light. We get that green light letter and we get to move forward. So when Jeff made the statement that if we don't have all of those lined up, we go back to square one and have to resubmit, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I caught the very end of Mary Jude's statement about we're in for the 2021, correct, Jeff? It is assumed next year in 2022, there is going to be a significant increase in the amount of applicants, correct?
Yes.
So we're just ahead of that giant wave of PFAS remediation projects. So if anything, we're doing things a little sooner than others. But we have our approval. So we need to do this. We have our approval for it. Paying for it is another issue, but we're in a good place, all things considered.
So Rich, question?
Yeah.
Just as simple as this. I mean, they go off for RFPs, the RFPs come back, we take a look at those numbers, and it doesn't mean that we are going to be at 11.5 million. It could be substantially less or somewhat different.
Correct.
Okay.
The way I understand it, if the wind blows the wrong way and the estimate of $11.5 million is short, we would need to find funding for the gap. And I don't know if there's a resubmission where you would be able to go through and move from 11.5 up to a higher amount. I'm certain it's not the first time it's ever happened. I'm sure there's another plan for if for some reason things go better than expected, you would use less.
Okay.
But 11.5 is a pretty good number, and it's passed sort of two scrutinies. We have the town's engineers who put together a plan and made a submission. At the state level, on behalf of the SRF, it's been reviewed and the plan is agreeable and they've accepted it. Again, it's not somebody with, an old Hallmark envelope and we figured out, well, should be about 11.5 million. As much as it's a bottom line number, there's probably, how big was the application? 50 pages?
Nearly 100.
Okay, it wasn't like, that's a good idea. We have engineers who've done this before. We're doing something where it has been done before, all of the smaller items, and it's being put together. And it's passed the state scrutiny. So
And there's some checkpoints along the way as well.
Absolutely.
As we continue down the design process, there'll be a 75% design cost estimate review, a 90% cost estimate review. There's contingency carried within that 11.5 million. This is pretty standard fare for infrastructure projects.
Okay.
And,
Can I
Mr. Chairman,
just just
Mr.
add a
Chairman?
little bit briefly.
Well-
Now, that first $6.5 million, the one that we're gonna start opening bids on, if I'm not mistaken, none of that money's been borrowed. And we don't know how much of that $6.5 million we're gonna use. That
Mr.
covers
Chairman,
Mason Road,
Right.
Station 1 and the tanks. That
Okay.
could be, it may only be 5. Who knows? We don't know
Okay.
what the bids are gonna be.
We don't know what they're gonna be.
We just
Okay,
have to ask it. It's a concept right now. But
who's
it's a
looking, Mr.
concept
Ruda?
that's well researched.
So I just want to, just for the sake of process, we do not have a quorum of voting members of the Capital Improvement Committee. We have non-voting member treasurer collector, we have non-voting member selectman and myself and you, Mr. Chairman. So I would propose that we continue for informational purposes. We listen to the highway presentation. We can ask Mr. Mayotte to go online and watch that presentation, ask robust questions of Jeff. Sure, they won't be quite as robust as they've been to this point, but we can give it our best shot. And
Who is Amanda?
Amanda is taking the minutes. She's.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if it was a member of the Capital Improvement Committee.
No.
So if everybody's agreeable to that, we'll continue to go with the understanding that we can't take any votes because we lost our quorum. We'll continue for public information purposes.
Good thinking.
The other thing I wanted to mention was, I thought at one point, Mr. Sullivan had his hand up to be recognized. I didn't want him to be overlooked. I didn't know if, I see it's down now, but I just want to make sure that he had a chance to say his piece.
I had a bunch of points to bring up, but a lot of them have been brought up, and I think and some of it was to Mr. Mayotte, just to try to ease his mind that we're not trying to circumvent anything, that it's a process. And I think a lot of those processes were just discussed. But, we have to, not only do we have to meet the state procurement laws, but some of these processes also have to go through DEP requirements and regulations as to projects getting, the proposed treatment being approved by them before we can put it out to bid. That the Calgon person, it has to be an approved treatment vendor through the state. It's not just anyone that creates treatment is approved to provide it for a public drinking water supply. And if Mr. Mayotte had a conversation with him and he can get him to put in a bid for that project, I certainly urge him to do it, because we already know what the estimate is. And if he can do it for $1 million, I urge him to double his price and do it for $2 million. As long as it meets the engineer's specs and requirements, we'll save a lot of money, and he'll make twice what he said he could.
Well said, Bob.
Okay, where do we go from here?
Mr. Chairman, can we move on to, if everybody is done with the discussion on water and sewer, I'd like to see if we can move on to the highway superintendent, who came back after our last meeting, to give a presentation on the chemical treatment request.
Let's move on.
So we are done with us then?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I've got another meeting to go to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Jeff, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Turn
So,
on a lamp or something, will you?
I'm sorry,
Turn on a lamp or something, will you?
I don't know I don't know what's going on with the screen, why it's so dark. I mean, it's,
You're a complete blackout.
Yeah. Restart
Um,
your camera, maybe. Stop video, start video.
I've tried that several times and tried to adjust it, and it doesn't seem to,
Okay.
doesn't want to, doesn't seem
Alrighty
to
then. Yes.
cooperate.
Why don't we move on, Jeff? And if you can figure it out, you can figure it out.
So I guess you need to allow me to share my screen, John, if that's possible.
Here it comes. You're the host. Make sure you don't cut us off. Or better yet, please do. You got it?
Yep. Okay, so can you see my screen now?
Yep.
Yeah, your PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes.
So basically, I put together a brief PowerPoint presentation just to describe the liquid de-icers. And just to start off, basically, any of the de-icers that you're using, the object of it is to lower the temperature of where water freezes. So in essence, using rock salt lies on the surface of the pavement or asphalt, and it's easily knocked off or blown away. And it's referred to as de-icer bounce. And basically what they say from research that they've done, as much as 80% of the rock salt or rock salt sand combination can be blown off with as few as 5 vehicle passes. So in essence, what they're trying to say is the liquid de-icers pre-treatment is much more effective. You go out and do the pre-treatment up to 8 or 10 hours before a storm event. I've looked at some equipment which I have shown here. This is basically a brine manufacturing machine that the department would potentially use. It's capable of producing 3,000 to 5,000 gallons of salt brine per hour. It's a stainless steel unit. I've done some research on several different models. This particular one here seems to be the most reliable and easiest to use. Some of them have a PLC unit that runs it where they measure the salinity. Essentially, what you're trying to do is get the solution to a 23.4 to 23.7% solution, and then the salt stays suspended in the liquid and doesn't settle out once it gets to that point. This is just basically a display of the controls for the unit. It's and then on the side is a salinity meter, and once you get once you take sampling and get it to that ideal 23.4% solution, it's easy to maintain that as you add salt and water is introduced and creates the brine. These are just a couple of pictures of the spraying equipment. The first being one that would be mounted, the ones that we would be looking at, they'd be mounted in one of the 6-wheel dump trucks, suggesting 2 units to be effective. I've also added just displaying a 450-gallon unit that potentially could be placed in a smaller 1-ton dump truck, and that also is equipped with a hose reel that allows you to do walkways and stairways and whatnot for parking lots, municipal buildings. So essentially, this slide I'm showing is the breakdown of the equipment costs. The brine maker is a little over $48,000. The sprayer units that would be used to treat the roadways are a little over $17,000 a piece, again, suggesting 2. And then 2 5,000-gallon poly storage tanks to store the brine material after production at the highway garage. And then, rough estimate of installation cost, approximately $6,500 and $4,500 freight cost. Puts the cost of everything just a little over $101,000. So here's a calculation of the overall capital cost with labor, equipment, and materials to to arrive at the overall cost for the material. So we added in the loader, brine operator, and cleanup costs with labor. And basically, 1 ton of salt produces about 850 gallons of the brine material. So the equipment cost, the brine makers, roughly $50,000. Repair and maintenance over a 10-year period, I'm calculating at about $5,000 with a residual value of a negative 5,000. So depreciating the cost completely over the 10 years, leading to an annual cost of $5,000 for the equipment, or 5 cents a gallon, give or take, based on a 100,000 gallon annual production rate. I've rounded up the cost of the material of the salt. Currently, we pay about a little over $48 a ton, rounded it to $50. Water cost per batch at $1, and electricity cost at $1. Puts us at a raw cost for the salt only at about 6 cents, and the actual cost per gallon when you factor in the labor, equipment, and materials, about 21 cents a gallon. The next slide I'm displaying there. So typically with rock salt, just plain rock salt, you'd be looking at 250 to 350 pounds of salt per lane mile. And with the salt brine, approximately 30 to 50 gallons of brine per lane mile. So I've made a cost comparison with rock salt at the existing cost on the high end, assuming $8.45 a lane mile. It's approximately a little over $700 per treatment, given that there's about 83 miles of roadway in Dudley. With the salt brine, to do a pre-treatment at the high end of $3 per lane mile, it's just under $250 per treatment for the 83 miles of roadway. So the cost comparison for rock salt and brine material combination. So if we were to use just rock salt, and making the assumption again that we're just over $700 per event at 20 events per year, and a pre-treatment before and after, or a pre-treatment before the storm, and then another application after the storm, would put the total cost with 20 events yearly at about $28,000. If we were to use the same assumption that there were 20 events and you were pre-treating with the brine for 20 events, and then post-storm treating with just rock salt, and again, the brine is more typically used for a pre-treatment, not for application after a storm or after an icing condition. It'll put the total around $19,000 to use a combination of the two, assuming 20 applications for 83 miles total, and then rock salt on after that. So also one of the board members asked me to take a look at cost for treated salt. So they, I guess the department has used in the past a pre-treated or pre-wetted salt. What they do is introduce a magnesium material with the salt. It's a wetting agent. Helps to minimize the bounce, makes it break down more easily because it's pre-wetted, is the theory. I've used a cost of $74.50 a ton, which is what I was quoted by the supplier, and certainly I think that cost would likely go down should we put that out to bid with them. But those were the assumptions that I would made for the calculation. So essentially, On the high end, about 1310 a lane mile for the treated salt, $1,087 per per application or for the storm event, and then making the assumption of 20 events like the others with an application pre-treating and then a post-storm application, puts us at a yearly cost of about $43,500 for just the treated salt. If we looked at it the same way and figured a combination of pre-treatment with the liquids and then a post-storm application of the pre-treated salt, it put us at about a total cost with the 20 applications at about 726 for a total. So essentially what we'd be looking at is if, in comparison from rock salt to a combination of pre-treatment with the liquid de-icer and the rock salt, it's about $9,000 roughly a year in savings. If you looked at it this way, at the cost displayed for the pre-treated material, it's about roughly $17,000 difference in cost if you were to pre-treat with the liquid de-icers and then use the pre-treated or the pre-wetted salt. So I guess, if anybody has any questions or comments or anything they'd like to add to that, certainly entertain any comments or questions.
Mr. Chairman? Jeff, what are we looking at for a price tag? Given the fact we're probably gonna have to go out and get bids on this equipment, what are we estimating the price tag will be as of today?
The overall price, again, would be a little over $101,000 is what I've estimated. I did get quotes directly from supplier. Most are actually all of the equipment that was quoted is readily available and would be ready to be shipped. Also, one of the things that I didn't mention is that included with the sprayer units, which currently right now the department's using traditional slide-in sanders. There's a couple of slide-in sanders in some of the dump trucks. There's also some all-season bodies that are used. None of these, all of these are manual controls as far as the application rates. So they're not metered. These units you'll see right here, this DSC 400 spray control unit. It's actually it's about a $2,000 option that's added to the unit. It's GPS controlled, so it's directly controlled by speed, and it's capable of monitoring the area of coverage so that you can calculate the usage as well as efficiency of the sprayers. So basically, you set to the prescribed application rate, again, 30 to 50 gallons per lane mile. These units are capable of spraying either single, double, or triple lane roadway, which lends itself to some efficiency as well, because assuming a lot of the back roads or side roads in town could potentially be treated with one pass, because they'd be spraying in the lane that they're traveling in as well as the opposing lane. Again, the sprayer unit or the control unit is speed sensitive, so it's accurate. It's reported to be accurate to whatever speed it's traveling at. So, it definitely lends itself further to efficiency, but also in conjunction with that, I think the trucks that are being used for spreading salt, to have those metered, or at least to be able to adjust those and test against the efficiency of those as well would be something that would be suggested along in conjunction with this.
Jeff, a question.
Sure.
Is this the same product as what you see being used by Mass Highway and some other DPWs?
It is. So
It is.
I've actually I was able to watch a presentation that was put on. The town of Sudbury actually adopted the use of liquids about 3 or 4 years ago. The UMass Amherst consortium is puts on regular presentations where they show the use of new, unique, or typical products that are being used or put to use by different departments. So they actually put on a presentation. They showed how they implemented it. Have reported good results, and there's actually another presentation that's supposed to be coming up in the near future that I'd like to get a copy of to be able to show some of the board members. And again, it's something that UMass Amherst is being put on, and once it's not available yet, but once that's put up online, they do make recordings of it, so it's capable for I could extend the link for people to go into.
I mean, if you see Mass Highway, the roadways that they take care of, and other communities that are using this, it's clearly a superior product to what we've traditionally used. So thank you for your presentation. It was informative.
Thank you. Again, so because it's in a liquid form, you're in theory, well, not just in theory, in reality, you're using far less material to begin with. It's already in the form that it wants to be in to be effective. It's in a liquid form. Again, it can be done in advance of a storm, and you're being proactive and trying to avoid the accumulation of ice and snow, and potentially getting a cleaner scrape down when you do get the snow and ice events. So, and you're right.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Ruda.
would the committee, beyond the traditional quotes that the highway would normally get for its two other requests, which was a pickup truck with a utility body and a stake truck, right, Jeff?
Correct.
The committee is not going to require anything beyond that, I would assume, just based on the fact they're pretty standard vehicles.
I would believe that to be true. The only thing out of the ordinary would be this request here. So I think you may end up with some scrutiny on this because it's a different technology than what the town has been using. But the other vehicles are just a typical off-the-shelf type of vehicle. So I think we'd be satisfied.
So is the committee satisfied with the cost breakdown that the superintendent provided, as well as just knowing the fact that it will go out to bid on the equipment?
I believe it would be satisfied. Yes.
Okay.
Anybody else? No? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so
Just handing it back off to me, Jeff? Yeah.
yep, should
Okay.
be
Yeah.
should be you.
All righty. I think that completes tonight's agenda, Mr. Chairman.
That was a good night.
You know what? Can we go back over some of the stuff Jeff was just talking about and put him under a little scrutiny and not go easy like we did with water and sewer?
Go ahead. Let her,
Why does he get a free ride?
Well, he's still new to town, so. Okay, does anyone have anything else? Looks like that's it then. Okay,
We'll have a working plan for the next committee meeting in terms of how we're going to proceed with the recommendations and so forth. We'll send that out.
okay. So do we need a motion to adjourn?
No, you don't, because you're not in session.
Good point.
Yeah, no quorum, Paul.
No quorum, so, okay. If no one else has any other thoughts on what was taken care of tonight,